Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Beit Midrash. As we were just talking about, I hope everyone had a good couple weeks off. Um, got to catch up on some reading, maybe. I think for the first time in my life, I actually read two books in like 2 weeks. Like, I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but I'm a super slow reader, so like I thought that was really cool. Um, they were also novels, so it goes a little faster than
Mhm.
this book, which we're going to go continue on in today. To be a Jew today, we're going to talk about chapter 2 here, or chapter 1, 2, so to speak, the God of Social Justice. So good to be back. Good to have you all back, and looking forward to resuming our learning together. And as we do, as I am wont to do, I wanted to open it up to you guys first to see if there was any preliminary thoughts, preliminary comments, questions that you still had after the reading, reactions.
Well, as I said, I feel like I've lived chapter 1 to the God of social justice after living 85 years. It's almost a cycle of Judaism. If I look back at my own family, which I don't want to talk about at length, I just wanted to find my voice here where I haven't felt, and it's no fault of anybody's here, just my own. This is something I've never done. I've not engaged publicly in matters theological or Jewish, but this I just couldn't put down. I've read beyond where we were supposed to read, and I'm sure I'll continue to do so. I think he's good. I think the way he presents his histories is clear to me, and I feel like I was there at most of it. But um, I guess I should begin by saying about just flipping pages, just maybe randomly on 49. It's Isaiah talking about what is desirable to the Lord. Get let free, let free the oppressed and break every yoke. Distribute your bread, the hungry bring home the outcasts. This is the house I lived in. It's not that there were necessarily a large number of people at all times, but there were always people who needed something and who left gifts when they could not pay, which usually were puppy dogs, which we all enjoyed a great deal in large numbers at some periods. Um, but the striving for human justice, I think, was at the core of my dad's there and his father's, and maybe even the grandfather who was the immigrant. But I think it was at the core of their being. And it was so strongly impressed upon us that when, for example, my first child was a boy, a grandson for Buddy Cooper, and he was um, not invited. It was just expected that when he was about 2.5, he would distribute what food and clothing to people who never knew who my dad never was working through a group or anything like that. But at 2.5, this kid is walking behind his grandfather and looking at people who are starving, who have no cover. Their children have no shoes on their feet, and they live precisely a mile and a half from the house that my dad lived in. And the lesson there was, and I don't think my son ever forgot it, is that you must let me think, he's only 2 at that point. It would have been, these people are hungry, they're cold, and they're only inches from your house. You do not have to go on a mission somewhere. There, wherever you look, you will find something that needs to be done. And then just in general, what he says about what he calls progressive Judaism, sort of its history and my general beliefs and activities run along this same line. See, let's find a good one to stop on.
Well, we'll come back to you also, Ellen, and see some other
Okay,
responses.
continue with
I want to just say, Ellen, thank you for that. Your father was powerful in beautiful ways, and he impacted so many of us. And, your legacy is amazing.
well, I think so too, but I don't want to just be an admiring daughter. I'm trying to write so that the very heart of what he believed and how he lived and how his worst enemies, the ones that he faced in ugly confrontation in courtrooms, were all with him at the end, not with him in thought or deed, but appreciated his gentle objection to what he saw around him, including themselves. but we'll do the best we can.
Karen?
Yeah, Ellen, I love hearing your voice, and it's just so touching to me. And I'd love to hear I know all of us would want to hear what you have to say at any time. So, yeah. So what I was going to say, it kind of relates to what you shared, Ellen, and what Lynn shared. I think what's happening for me reading this book is that when we broke last time, I think somebody said about the Haredi or the traditionalists, that the way that they practice was like top level. And I think for me, like an earlier version of me would have thought that that's top level Judaism. But I think what's happening as I'm reading this book and listening to the book so far is that, it's not top level. It's not top level. It's a different level. And that this progressive Jew that I'm identifying with right now so far, the social justice, which I didn't grow up with, which I didn't have parents that were into this. I didn't live in Birmingham, but having lived here, and having actually become a Jew here in 43 years, that's what's happening for me. Like I'm claiming my space as a Jew, like not in a top down, but as an equal equal. Not as a one down, because I don't do all the mitzvahs, and not as a put down, because I'm into social justice, just as a multitude, as part of the mix. And it's a freer space to be in. It feels good, and just want to share that. That's where I am.
I just want to say, it's good to hear about your growth and your development as you're reading this. And I hope you keep an open mind as we continue reading it and continue growing and say, like, oh, like, I found my place. Well, okay, maybe keep reading and maybe you'll find more of your place too. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, it is a
yes.
place, it's a place issue. And it is a place issue, but it feels, I don't know, there's some like blessing from this book of my Judaism.
Thank
For
you.
me,
I
right
think
now. That's what I'm saying right now. I don't know
Excellent.
what, yeah, that's all I'm saying. Please don't, yeah. I don't know what you meant by that. Just I don't know what you meant by stay open. That kind of
I think what
scared
I
me.
meant was, we're on chapter 2.
Right.
So I'm glad to hear that it's opening your mind and your feelings up to the possibilities and helping you find your place.
Mhm.
And I don't want you to say, like, this is where I am in chapter 2, and then feel like you can't move. I want you to
No,
stay open to what
I
he'll say
don't,
in chapter 3 and chapter 4 and part 3 to feel
right.
like, but that's where my place is as well. And
Right.
help, like, continuously evaluating where your place is along the way. That's all. I think
Absolutely.
that's all I was trying to say.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. I mean, that what he talked about in chapter 2 has resonated with me so far in my own Jewish journey so far. And I remain in process because I'm process theology. Just
Excellent.
saying, just saying.
Yes, Barbara Ayland.
So I really enjoyed this chapter 2 also. There were a couple places where I felt like his description of progressive Judaism wasn't fair to both Reform and conservative, because I see the differences really clearly. But then I realized it was more of a historical perspective for Reform Judaism, because he talked about, that the Reform Jews, found these places in the Bible that would explain their beliefs. And I'm like, I don't think Reform Jews today really care about being explained in the Bible, but he was talking sort of historically. And so then that made sense. And then on conservative Judaism, he talked about how he lumped it with Reform as if, the rituals don't matter. And I thought, that's not what I'm seeing at, Temple Bethel. Was there he was talking more about it's not necessarily the congregation, and so then it made a little more sense. So I kind of worked my way through some of my objections to the chapter, but in the end I felt kind of left out, because I'm one of those skeptical people about God, and maybe even I'm being a little too generous, because maybe I'm not even skeptical. Maybe I'm just like, not, there is no entity. And I feel real connected to Judaism. And I think the one thing he left out was this Torah study, the wisdom of our predecessors, of our tradition, the wisdom. I get into it on an intellectual level. So he talked about spirituality, but for me, the wisdom is the spirituality. I'm not a what, the Buddhism. I mean, I don't like that kind of thing usually. So I felt a little like he missed me.
Barbara, one thing he hit just on the bell for me was the statement that what matters is what the relationship we have with others.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how that's stated.
So I heard, listening to Karen and to Ellen, I heard their ideas that their individual spirituality was came out of what they were reading. And of course, Ellen has a strong genetic component to her spirituality and what she does. But I saw that, I mean, reading the whole chapter made me think that this was just a historical perspective on the way that conservative Judaism broke away from Orthodox Judaism, and that the conservative, um, the more liberal people just became more liberal in our interpretation of what spirituality and Judaism became, and that it was social justice that we had to enact. It wasn't just sitting there reading and doing rituals for ritual's sake, but we had to move on and tikkun olam, take care of the world. So anyway, I saw this more as a 10,000-foot look at what the chapter was telling us, which was the history of conservative Judaism to me, anyway.
I was thinking it more as and I think he tries to be clear that he's trying to divide Jews into groups by what we believe, and he says that we shouldn't even expect this to line up with denominations. He's pretty clear that he doesn't expect this chapter to describe most or all conservative Jews or most of all Reformed Jews, probably more those two groups than ultra Orthodox, certainly. But it's sort of like there are different ways you can be drawn to Judaism and think of its theological meaning to you. And this was one view, but it doesn't, there are going to be conservative Jews who don't see it at all. And I think Reconstructionist Jews, as he talks about them a little bit, sound probably closer to Barbara, where it's the civilization and the wisdom, but you can even reject the idea that there's a God there. I also love the quote about Reconstructive Judaism as what there is no God, and Mordecai Kaplan is his prophet.
Yeah.
Pretty snarky.
So let's back up for one moment here, because I am glad to hear that this book is having an impact on everyone, and you're feeling it, so to speak. But let's kind of evaluate a little bit as well. I think Joshua's right in that the whole reason I think he goes into these different perspectives is for the exact reason that it doesn't actually line up with denominations cleanly. That I think if you were to look at this synagogue at Temple Bethel itself, you're going to find people within it who fit into all of the categories that he's talking about. We very certainly have traditionalists in our synagogue who believe this is the ritual, this is the way the ritual is to be done, this is the way the ritual has always been done, this is the way the ritual has to be done, because this is the way we do it. We even in this room, we have people who have already said, like, they're feeling very close to this chapter, the social justice, the God of social justice one. As we go on, there will be, the evolutionary one, which I suspect there will be a few from there, and there's an atheist one, and so which I can tell you from conversations we certainly have in this congregation as well. So, the advice I gave to Karen earlier, I think applies also that, if you think you found your place, I encourage you to keep an open mind and keep reading, because you might find, I actually fit in more than one of these categories, and I do actually feel this way as well. Or if you haven't found your place, we just might not have helped you find it yet. So we're going to keep working on it. There's still a lot of book to go. So
But Rabbi, do you think some of this has to do with there's only one conservative synagogue in Birmingham, Alabama, and you know we have to lump everybody who's somewhere in the conservative realm of thinking, but some of them may be atheists. I mean, but as opposed to if you were to live in Boston or you were to live in New York City, Manhattan, you'll have one synagogue potentially that has exactly your ideals, and that's because of there's be so many synagogues and they can subspecialize basically.
Um, Possibly to an extent. I don't think it's going to be quite as clean as that either. Like, I don't think if you were to say, I'll use Atlanta because I think that's one of the more, or actually, you know what? I'll use Los Angeles because I'm kind of familiar with that community as well. Um, you know, Temple Beth Am, which is a giant synagogue in the heart of Los Angeles, in one of the big Jewish neighborhoods there, is they have, to my knowledge, about 3 or 4 services going on every Shabbat. Why? Because there are traditionalists who want the old classic traditionalist type service. There are social justice people who want something different. They have evolutionists who want something different. So they offer different options along the way. Now, Los Angeles, there are lots of different options of synagogues. You want the social justice? There's a synagogue that is conservative leaning and very strong in social justice there. Just don't call them a synagogue. They don't like it. But they are a spiritual community, not a synagogue. But that's a different issue. So, I think synagogues and synagogue culture is not quite that clean cut. I think if you were to go to a large city, yes, you might find some that are more towards one of these particular groups that he's doing and might lean a little more in that particular direction. But I still think you'll find congregants who are going to it for, even if they might not lean in that direction as well. Does that make sense? Margaret, you're muted.
As you may know, I moved here from Philadelphia. And from my home, I liked at that point to walk to synagogue because I could walk to 3 different ones. I could walk to a conservative synagogue, to a reconstructive synagogue, a reconstructionist, and to a Jewish renewal synagogue. And one of the things that I noticed was that there was a certain amount of flexibility in that many people would go from one to the other and be in one synagogue on one week and one on the other, and some of the basic underlying tenets really match up quite of all 3 of those matched up more or less quite nicely with some of the things that we discussed. And the thing that really separated the 3 had to do with the style of the services, more than with anything else. I mean, conservative synagogue wasn't a whole lot different from this one was in some ways. Reconstruction was very similar. The Jewish renewal one was more like on Saturday going to the Kabbalat Ruach that we've been having here, but it was a matter of style, really more than underlying philosophy, at least as it came across to the congregation.
And sometimes, I don't say this for myself, but I say this generally, sometimes it's a matter of who the rabbi is. Like there are times you might not like the general thrust of the congregation, but you really like the rabbi, so you'll go there. Um, so sometimes that's the way people make decisions as well, or because their friends are going there, so that's where they go. So before we go on, what is the core of this idea of the God of social justice? What is he outlining and trying to picture? Let's just make sure we understand what we're talking about here too. What is the basic belief system?
I think it's that I'm sorry, Christine, that the rules and the rituals were really built so that we are kind to each other and take care of each other. So the core value is tikkun olam, repairing the world, and all the rest of it is built to help that happen. So it's sort of what is the primary, and the traditionals have one idea, and then the progressives have this other idea.
Good. So the rituals exist for the sake of a greater moral order, and they're supposed to, in theory, they're supposed to help us get and attain that higher moral order. But if they're not doing that, then we don't need them. We need the higher moral order is what takes precedent, not necessarily the background of the tradition that we have, that has come down so far. Does that seem fair, accurate? Diane?
So the one question that I think you raised in the chapter that I'm not sure I got an answer to was the question of if you are engaged in social justice, but not doing it, feeling the connection to your faith in the Almighty, is that still a proper attitude for someone who calls themselves Jewish? And I don't know that he really answered that, and I kept reading, looking for the answer. And it's a question that I've thought about so many times throughout the years, because there are many, many people who have many, many reasons for why they don't do certain things, but they say, I have great Jewish values and I'm engaged in social justice. And so that's how I practice my Judaism. So I didn't get an answer for that, and I'm curious.
So before we get to that question, I just want to make sure we're good on the basic premise of what he's saying. Yes? Because that's like, Diane, you're actually going to segue to what I was going to say next, which is great. So that's the basic idea of religion, in this view, is the pursuit of higher moral order. And that's what we're aiming to do over a ritual. And that takes precedence over ritual. Barbara, Brandy?
I just wanted to say that we don't necessarily need to reject ritual, even though ritual is not as rigorous. It's still valued, and it's still valued particularly as a community building exercise. So I wanted to say, he clearly makes the difference between who's concentrating on ritual and who's concentrating on another idea. But we don't reject ritual because it means something when everybody is reaching for the tzitzit, when everybody is wearing the talit. Ritual does help a lot in building community. And I'm pretty sure that in Judaism, community is really important.
So I don't think he says that the social justice believers reject ritual. I think he says the moral order takes precedence over the ritual, and that when the ritual is no longer serving the moral order, that's when we discard it. That's kind of the way I read him more, was that ritual without the moral order is what they push back against. But
I think it was
that,
even stronger than that. It was if the ritual goes against the moral order, then you reject it.
right. So I don't think, and I don't think he, and I don't think those who believe in the God of social justice argue that ritual, like they don't need ritual at all. I do think they say ritual is only useful to the point that it helps us continue to advance um, the larger moral order and make the world a better place. And if it doesn't, or if it doesn't help us do that in any way, then there's no point in continuing it. Now, coming back to Diane's question, what is the flaw in that? What is the flaw as Professor Feldman describes um, in this worldview? Um, uh, I like to follow the Haggadah here. We're going from degradation to praise. So we'll start with the negatives and then we'll end with the positives. So Diane raised one question before: is fine. So Judaism should advance moral order and should be trying to make the world a better place and tikkun olam and so on. And he does raise the question, so if you know what the moral order is, and all people are equally valuable and all people are equally holy and all people deserve the same justice and so on and so forth, then what makes any of what you're doing Jewish? And he even says, like, you could be a Unitarian Universalist and get to the exact same place. Is that your question, Diane? Is that the section you were talking about?
Yeah. Actually, the section I was talking about came earlier, where I think it was specific to if you don't believe in God, but you still engage in practices of social justice, how do you then
Okay.
identify that as being a Jewish thing? If it was a question of faith, really.
Okay. So he does raise both questions.
Mm-hmm.
He raises the question of, if you're doing the work of social justice and seeing social justice as the highest ideal, then what makes it actually Jewish? What's Jewish about doing that? And then he also says, I think it was towards the end, wasn't it, Diane?
I'm sorry, I failed here. I didn't go back. I was looking for the answer, so I didn't think
No.
would have to find the question, but I never found it. Won't do that again.
I was trying to find where he was talking about your question, but that I think that it's kind of the flip too, is if you believe in God but believe in social justice prioritizing, then what makes it distinctly Jewish? But at the same time, if you don't believe in God but do believe in social justice, what's making it Jewish? And I'm not sure he does entirely answer it, because I'm not sure he actually has the answer. And I think I think he's raising a question and a challenge for us to wrestle with. And if somebody has something they would like to contribute to this, I think that's fine. I'm happy we would love to hear it. But I think that's the challenge. One of the challenges he's trying to raise. He has at least one more big one, but Sharon, you're muted. So you got unmute first. Let me see if I can help you.
It's hard on the phone.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got it. Okay. First of all, I found the sense of the history and that Judaism is really evolving very it touched me, and it fits, and it made a lot of things make sense. And in answer to Diane's question, what I perceived is that it's a matter of choice. You can have all the social justice ideas and behaviors that are very similar to the Unitarians or any other group, many other groups, but either by heritage or choice, you identify, you choose, you do rituals, some rituals, you don't have to do them all. You can do the Passover, you can do Friday night, you can do what makes sense and what makes your life meaningful. But the sense of choice, like he talked about, the idea of us being chosen as being an kind of an agreement, a choice, it was not forced, like in the traditionalist perspective as I understood it. So the idea of choice really resonates. And the whole chapter by the end, especially the evolutionary part, really, I felt like I was a puzzle with pieces that were in a lot of different places that is beginning to come together. That's all.
Excellent. Margaret? Margaret and then Cindy.
It seems to me a thing that seems to me different about Judaism, and I could be entirely wrong, but it's only based on my knowledge of people who are Jews and people who aren't Jews, and is that somehow it seems to me, at least, and maybe I'm a little bit like Ellen, but it seems like it comes from your mother or your father's milk, that social justice is just a defining importance from early age, and throughout life, and it doesn't seem to, it seems to me that at least the Christians that I know have sort of come through it to it almost secondarily, rather than as a primary, as something that's absolutely primal.
Yeah, my one pushback to that will be the same that he points out with Unitarian Universalists. Unitarian Universalists are raising their kids as well on the idea of social justice and all people being equal and all people being loved. So, what makes it distinctly Jewish? And I'll also add, just anecdotally, that I've had two different UU ministers tell me, say, by the way, I want to let you know, some of my best congregants are Jews. I try to tell them I'd love them back at some point, but Cindy?
I could also walk to a Universalist, Unitarian Universalist church, and also heard some of the same stuff. But somehow, maybe it's just a prejudice. It just somehow didn't seem as primary to me.
I think I'm sort of going back to what you said in the beginning, Rabbi, how, let's just not stop here in chapter 1, I don't know, at the very beginning, that we have a ways to go. Because I don't think that he's saying that being a progressive Jew is the be all and end all, and that, I'm sorry, that your Judaism be only social justice. I think that he's actually saying, like at the end of the chapter, that if we take out the spirituality, that he's saying somehow we have to learn to link the spirituality to our liberal values. When I say our, I mean anybody who subscribes to progressive Judaism. So I don't think that he's saying that, I don't want he's saying we're going to lose our Judaism if we lose that spirituality. We're going to lose our Judaism if we don't at least wrestle with God. I can't, I'm like Barbara, I'm not sure about that thing, but to wrestle with God. So yes, there has to be a difference. Subscribing to social justice to repair the world is great. But like Barbara said, we can't lose that sense of community that is sustaining. We can't lose its spirituality, which is also sustaining for the soul. We're not just robots performing acts of loving kindness out in the community. So I don't think that he's fallen short in answering those questions. I just don't think we're there yet.
Possibly. I do want to say that anecdotally, I do know individuals who, don't observe Shabbat, don't keep kosher, don't celebrate holidays except for maybe lighting Hanukkah candles, but their entire Judaism is locked into social justice. And those, I think, are some of the people that he's describing more, of the people who Judaism is social justice. That's what Judaism is. And that is all Judaism is. And I think generally boiling Judaism down to any one thing is a dangerous prospect. But I think that's a little bit what he's trying, where he's the worldview he's trying to describe. But I do want to come back to the community section, the community part that you mentioned in a moment. Christine?
Thanks.
Nice to have you back, by the way.
It's really good to be back. I've missed you all. And I adore this book. I'd like to pull together a couple of threads, and maybe I'll start with what Margaret said about Christians and social justice and not necessarily being as involved. And I would just like to cite, having been about the loosest Christian ever before I converted, and being married to a lifelong Catholic who hasn't been to church in 25 years, but will always be Catholic. And at the heart of his faith and his action is social justice. He goes out every weekend and has for the past 18 years to do things for those less fortunate than us in the community. And that is a tenet of his faith. And I think it's just because his faith is exercised through action. And I'd like to pull that into what I think this book is trying to do, and again, we're so early on in the book, but it strikes me that what the author might be trying to do is reframe how we put people into boxes. And, having been, converting at Temple Emmanuel and wondering if I'd ever fit in there. But finding my place in Torah study and finding my place in the social justice things that we did was how I found my Jewishness. And that, of course, changed with, as you mentioned, Rabbi, when there's a change in leadership, sometimes you feel like it's not your place anymore. And that's where I am right now. But also as part of my conversion, I've always wondered if I'd be a real Jew, a decent Jew. I was a crappy Catholic, and I figure I'm probably a bad Jew too. But what I appreciate about the book is that it's not so much about, are you a real Jew because you're only Reform? But even rearranging those boxes into, can a progressive Jew be also XYZ? Can a traditionalist be also? And I guess what I'm saying is that I think, I'm talking too long, I'm really sorry. I guess what I'm saying is that I think there are a lot of ways to be Jewish. There are a lot of ways to find community. And I think it's unfortunate when we try to paint any Jew or any Christian with one brush, because we all find our spirituality in a lot of different ways.
Good. I want to come back to that in a minute too. But Lisa, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, I just two things to say, and they're kind of separate. One is just that I think I'm picking up on what several people have said, like Cindy, that when I got to the end of reading about progressive Judaism, for me, it's not enough. I mean, for me, it just feels like I was so glad when Temple Bethel added a social action committee, because I want that to be part of my Judaism, but to have that be the entirety of my Judaism, just like for me, I need that spirituality. I need that grappling with God. I need the Torah, and I need some rituals. I need all of that. So I'll look forward to reading on and seeing like what I can piece together with to go along with the progressive Judaism. But one other thing that I think he's saying that always bothers me, and again, I don't want to be, I guess, pejorative about a group of people. I think there are people who just do the rituals, who I don't see them acting in good and kind ways in other parts of their lives, but they're like really, really intent on doing every ritual exactly as it's written. And I think he would say that, well, and that's sort of Isaiah saying, like, is this the fast that I desire? Like, you know, you can't just do the rituals without the social justice. And I think he would say those people are not, you know, are not Jews I want to identify with, the people who are just doing rituals and not, and maybe, you know, maybe they're taking advantage of people, or, you know, placing a stumbling block before somebody with a handicap, or whatever, something in their the way they make their livelihood is taking advantage of people. I feel like that's, he's really saying that can't be all we are either.
Good. So I want to try to address and come back to a couple things that have been said. Lisa, you kind of, Cindy touched on it, and then you kind of touched on it too. Is one of the challenges he talks about is how do you build community out of this? And Barbara Brandy, you mentioned this also, is that ritual builds community. That when you are all doing something together, and doing the same thing together, that binds you together also, that act. But when social justice takes the priority over the ritual, and you lose some of that ritual observance, or you lose some of that ritual connectivity, how do you build a community out of that? How do you build a community out of universal values? And that's one of the things he tries to wrestle with in this chapter too, is he says, was it 65, that civilizational community does not require God, but in practice, it almost certainly does require an appeal beyond universal liberal values, plus particularized weekly worship. That was hard to say. I don't know why. This is the reason, I think, that progressive Jewish institutions often struggle to create and shape communities in which most of their nominal members actually want to participate regularly. You know, universal values does not make you want to join a community, because you have a universal community to do that with. And I actually really liked his phrasing on the previous page. The recurrent question for any intentional community, including any religious community, is why are we doing this? So if your action is universal, if your response to why am I doing this is universal values, is that enough with which to build a community? And Lisa kind of, I don't know if this is exactly what Lisa was saying, so correct me if it's not, but it sounds like that doesn't feel like enough for her to be doing. And I think she's not the only one who feels that way. The other thing, so that's a question to wrestle with, and I actually think that's an interesting question, for our board of directors to wrestle with whenever we're making a decision: is why are we doing this? Why is this the choice that we're doing? And thinking, every time we do something, why are we doing this? Because if we don't have a good answer, that's a problem for the direction that we're trying to lead generally. Also, I'll come back to something Christine said in a moment, but the other thing Lisa said is, there is, yes, there is a concept in rabbinic thought of I think I've mentioned before, never birshuta Torah, which basically translates as like a scoundrel within the bounds of Torah. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? It's somebody who is meticulously religiously observant, but is still a jerk. They follow the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. And yes, I think that's why a lot of people get turned off by either, I don't want to broadly say Orthodox, but Orthodox or Haredi Judaism, is because they see them doing things that they know aren't actually the right thing to do, and they think they're doing it halachically, and people just get kind of frustrated and angry. It's like, well, what does the Torah mean if you're going to still act awfully? Yes, you can daven 3 times a day. Yes, you can put on tefillin every day. Yes, you can keep kosher. Yes, you can turn off all the electronics on Shabbat. But if you're still awful, you sit there and get Isaiah. Is this the fast that I wanted? No, I want you to be better people. I want you to be changed by the ritual. But on the flip side, observing the moral values,
it's almost over,
without the ritual feels kind of empty also. So how do we find that middle ground in our lives between the two, where we're expressing our deep moral commitments and the rituals are feeding into that, and the rituals are reinforcing it, and the rituals are helping us continue to live better lives and more moral lives along the way. I know it's getting late and some of you are going to have to go, but one last thing I want to add, what Christine was saying is, listening to some of you talking throughout this class, I was reminded of a great midrash that usually comes around Sukkot, and it talks about the lulav and the etrog, and why do we use specifically the lulav and the etrog. And the way the rabbis frame it is it has to do with Torah learning and good deeds. And they say, the lulav produces good fruits, but doesn't have much smell. So, that represents people who have either have Torah study or moral behavior, but not both. They have one or the other. I can't remember which one is which at the moment. I'd have to look it back up. The myrtle represents the ones who have the opposite. They might have Torah learning, but not the moral behavior. Because the myrtle has a lovely smell, but doesn't have any flavor, doesn't have any taste to it. The willow represents people who don't have either. They don't have Torah learning and they don't do good things. And the etrog represents people who have both, because it has both flavor and smell. Now, putting the categorization aside for a moment, the part I really want to focus on is, what do? We bring all of them together. We bring all 4 together because we recognize that as a community, we need all 4 kinds of people. And that we as a Jewish community are less when we exile any of those people from our community. And they don't feel like part of our community. So I feel a little bit along this line as well, is that, we need traditionalists. We might not always agree with them, but we need them. Progressives may or may not speak to us, but we need them. We're going to get to evolutionary and we're going to get to atheists. We need them too. And that's part, I think, of our struggle as a community and as Jews now is how do we bring all those people together and how do we make them all feel like part of a Jewish community, despite our wide disparate beliefs in what it means to be Jewish. That was kind of my thought, but any closing thoughts, comments before we wrap up?
Rabbi, this is Martin.
Hey, Martin. Welcome back to you also.
I'm thoroughly enjoying this group and I appreciate all this conversation. And I have this curiosity about Judaism right now, and I also have curiosity about artificial intelligence, which I've been learning about the two of them at the same time. And my thoughts after thinking about all this is that traditionalists in the future are going to get more and more important as AI grows, and it's not even going to be recognizable 2 or 3 years from now. I think Judaism is going to change. We're going to need the traditionalist. And also, I think we might be looking in the future towards something like everybody has their own individual group. They might work as a group or individually, and there's going to be different flavors for everybody. So since I've been thinking about both of these a lot lately, I just thought I'd throw that out there and wonder if rabbis are talking about artificial intelligence. And that might be a discussion for another day.
Yeah, I mean, I gave a sermon loosely on artificial intelligence a year or two ago. Yeah, we're having conversations about it. I'm not sure, any of us really know what the conversation really is. What's the question we actually need to be asking about it? I will say, kind of anecdotally, I did see one thing where a guy asked his chat GPT, do you have like, what religion are you? And he's like, well, I'm a bot. I'm an AI. I don't have a religion. Like, okay, well, if you did have a religion, based on what you know, what would you pick? He said, oh, easy, Judaism. And then the chat GPT, he kept asking it questions, and the chat GPT kept going on and on. Like, this is why I would pick Judaism, and this is all the things that Judaism represents, and this is what it was kind of funny to read. If I can find it again, I'll send it to everybody. But it was an interesting take on it.
Is that just because we have the most discussion on the internet? So like AI has learned the most about us? No.
I don't know, but
AI being what it is, I bet it guessed that the person asking was Jewish.
I mean, I do think he was Israeli, so that may or may not have had something to do with it. But I'd have to go back. If I can find it again, I'll let y'all know. All right. Well, kol hakavod, everyone. Thank you for learning together, and looking forward to learning. I'm trying to remember what he calls this one, but we'll call it the God whose law evolves. We'll try to work on that and learn that one next week. So have a good week, everybody. Be well. I hope to see y'all tomorrow night at Shabbat, Friday night at the JCC. If I don't see you there, I hope to see you Shabbat morning to celebrate Bar Bonfield. If I don't see you then, I hope to see you sometime soon. And at the latest, I hope to see y'all next Thursday for class. So be well, everybody. Take care. And if I don't see you before then, Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.